Welcome to Ms. Walt's mini review on pedigrees. Specifically, this review will focus on spotting autosomal dominant versus autosomal recessive traits within a pedigree. Now first, let's take a look at this pedigree. A quick reminder, boxes are males, circles are females, and if they're filled in, they have the trait. If they're blank, they do not. So an empty box in this case shows that they don't have the trait. So in terms of their genotype, individual 7 is little a, little a. Oh, let me get my pen working. Little a, little a. All right, so he is unaffected. But if we look at his siblings and his parents, they are affected. In this case, every time we see an affected child, the parent shows that trait. This is a hint that it is an autosomal dominant trait. So, for instance, we know that 6 has the trait, and so we're going to give her a big A, and same with 5. He has the trait, give him a big A. It also means that each of these parents have a big A, and the question is, what do these parents have in the second part of their genotype? The answer lies in number 7. Number 7 is autosomal recessive. And so since this is a dominant trait, that means that each of his parents have to carry the recessive allele. And from that information, we know that each parent is a heterozygote for this trait. Recapping, this is a dominant trait because parents are affected and then children are affected. Over here we have a parent affected and a child affected. When we see a recessive individual, that clues us in as to the genotype of the parents. The pedigree shows us the phenotype, and then we can piece together their genotype from that. Again, this is an autosomal dominant pedigree. Now, let's look at autosomal recessive. What are some of the clues we have for an autosomal recessive trait? Well, it's the opposite. In this case, we see unaffected parents. Here, number 8 and 9, we see unaffected parents that have an affected child. So the key to knowing this is recessive is right here. 8 and 9 are unaffected, but they have an affected child. It's recessive again, and so here the trait gets little a, and the parents here are unaffected. So they're going to have a dominant allele, and each will also have a recessive allele, because one of the little a's from 17 had to come from 8, and the other one had to come from 9. We can trace this back through the rest of the pedigree, but this is where we're shown that this is autosomal recessive. So to recap, autosomal dominant, we see affected parents having affected children. It doesn't mean all of their children will be affected, but an affected parent will have affected children. In autosomal recessive, we see that unaffected parents have an affected child. And those are some tips as to pointing out from pedigree and figuring out whether a trait is autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive. This is Ms. Walt, and I hope this helped.